Hello everyone, Zenith20 back again. In this video, we'll be talking about procedures. So what are procedures? In Visual Basic, a procedure is a block of code that performs a specific task. Every line of executable code in your application must be inside some procedure, such as the main procedure. Procedures organize and give structure to your code as they provide firstly, reusability. Procedures can be called from different parts of the code, making it easy to use code and avoid repetition. Secondly, modularity, as procedures allow code to be modular and broken down into smaller manageable chunks. This helps to reduce complexity and improve maintainability. And thirdly, readability. Procedures make code more readable and understandable. By giving tasks a meaningful name, it is easier to understand what the code does, even without knowing the implementation details. Now, procedures can be divided into two parts, subroutines and functions. So what are subroutines? A subroutine is a type of procedure that performs a specific task without returning a value. It is defined using the sub keyword and it is executed as a sequence of programming statements. Subroutines can be used to modify variables, display messages, or execute other code blocks. Typically, you invoke the procedure from some other place in the code. This is known as a procedure call. When the procedure is finished running, it returns the control back to the calling code which invoked it. The calling code is a statement or an expression within a statement that specifies the procedure by name and transfers control to it. Now, what are functions? A function is a type of procedure that performs a specific task and returns a value. It is defined using the function keyword and must have a return data type, such as integer or string. Functions can be used to calculate values, concatenate strings, or perform other operations that return a value, which is known as the return value that can be assigned to the calling code. Both functions and procedures should use parameters. So what exactly are parameters? In most cases, a procedure needs some information about the circumstances in which it has been called. A procedure that performs repeated or shared tasks uses different information for each call. This information consists of variables, constants, and expressions that you pass to the procedure when you call it. A parameter represents a value that the procedure expects you to supply when you call it. The procedure's declaration it defines its parameters. An argument, on the other hand, represents the value you supply to a procedure parameter when you call the procedure. The calling code supplies the arguments when it calls the procedure. Now, parameters can be passed by reference or by value. When you pass an argument to a procedure, you can choose to pass it either by ref or by val, which determines how the value of the argument is used and modified within the procedure. Passing an argument by ref means that the procedure will receive a reference to the original memory location of the argument's value, rather than a copy of the value itself. This means that any changes made to the argument within the procedure will also affect the original value outside of the procedure. Passing an argument by val means that the procedure will receive a copy of the original value, rather than a reference to its memory location. This means that any changes made to the argument within the procedure will not affect the original value outside of the procedure. So here is an example of some really basic code. We have two numbers, num1 and num2, and we are getting the sum of it and we're giving the output to the console. Real simple, the output is 30. What we'll do now is that we're going to extract this code into its function. So first of all, let's go with making a function. To create a function, we use the function keyword followed with the name of the function. So in this case, our name of the function is add numbers. And then we are going to give the parentheses. In the parentheses, we are going to give the parameters. In this case, we have two parameters which the function requires, which is num1 and num2. So we're going to give those two parameters. We're going to give num1, and then we're going to give its data type. It is an integer, so we'll give it as integer. And then we're going to give num2 also as an integer. Lastly, we want to define the return data type. Add numbers is a function which returns the sum of those two numbers. So the sum is also an integer. So after the parentheses and outside of it, we're going to give as integer, which will define the data type for our result. After pressing enter, we get the ending statement for our function. So let's extract this code into our function. We are going to have the sum variable the same as it was, and we're going to simply use our num1 plus num2. That will give us the sum of our two numbers, and then make sure that you return the sum of the numbers. When we are returning the sum, the variable, the function add numbers will have its value replaced by the sum. So basically, you can assign the function to any assignment statement which you're writing. We can use this function by removing this code, and we can take the sum in two ways. We can assign the sum to a variable. Suppose we have the sum variable, and we can use the add numbers followed with the parameter. We are going to have the arguments in it. Suppose we're going to pass 10 and 30 in it. Now that is the sum. We are going to output the sum to the console. And now we can run the program. So you can see the sum of our two numbers is given, which is 40. Or in the other way, we can also extract this function and we can simply pass it into the console.writeLine, which also gives the same result as the add numbers returns the sum. So the sum value is replacing the add numbers function over here. If we run our program, we still get 40, which is the correct result. There is another way to return from a function, and that is a much more clearer way. However, it is advised that you use the return keyword in the function as it is more readable. The other way is by writing add numbers or the name of your function with the equal sign followed with the value you want to assign to it. Now in this, we can understand that the function add numbers is being assigned the return value sum. If we return the program, we can see that 40 is our answer again. Similarly, we can write a procedure. A procedure is much more different from a function, and we can write it in this way by having the sub, and suppose we want to show the username along with the greeting. So we can write greet user. In that, we're going to have one parameter, and that is the username. The username will be a string, and we can pass it as a string. In fact, we won't need this. So that's our sub. Now you can see for the sub or the subroutine, we do not need a return data type because the sub does not return any value. It just processes and runs the tasks which are given to it. So a simple procedure we have defined, we have greet user, which is the name of the procedure, and username, which we're going to take from the control over here. Let's write the processes which are going to be run in this procedure, and we're going to show hello in inverted commas. We're going to give some space, and we are going to concatenate the username. To use this subroutine over here, we are simply going to call it in this way, greet user, along with the parameter which you have to pass. In this case, the username is a string, so we can pass, for example, Zenith. If we run the program, you can see that we're getting hello Zenith along with the greeting and the name. The special thing about the procedure is that you cannot assign it to any assignment statement. So if we have dim suppose X, and we're trying to assign X the greet user, you can see that we cannot assign it because a subroutine does not give any return value. It only runs the given commands which are given inside it, and it does not have any return value. The last topic which we will discuss will be about passing mechanisms. You can pass the parameters in two ways, by using ByRef and ByValue as previously discussed. This will be typically useful in a statement where we want to modify variables. So we can just modify this procedure and write modify variables. We're going to have two variables. The first one we can pass as, the first one we can give A, we can give it any name, and we can pass it suppose as an integer. The second one, B, we can also pass it as an integer. We can remove this line. So now we have a clean procedure of modify variables, and we're going to test the ByRef and ByVal flags over here. So the ByRef and the ByVal work before the parameter. Before you have written the name of the parameter, we give the flag of the ByRef or ByVal. Suppose we want to pass the parameter a by val. So we're going to write by val, and we're going to then give the name of the parameter. You can see that the highlighting has gone because Visual Studio already says that by val is the default value for all of the parameters. So by default, all of the variables and all of the parameters in the procedure are passed by value. So we can still have it. It won't have any error. We can pass the second one variable by ref. And we are going to modify the parameter a. Remember that parameters can act as variables. So you can use them similar ways you would use a variable. We can give a the value of suppose 100, and we can give b the value of 100 again. Now we're going to call this procedure. So we can have two values over here. Num1 equals to 10 and num2 equals to 10. We will write its initial value. So we are going to give initial values a, will give a placeholder, and then b will give another placeholder. We will give the value of num1 and num2. You can also replace this a and b by num1 and num2. That would be much more clear. So we're going to output it. Currently, we're not using modify variables. You can see the initial values of num1 and num2 are 10 as defined. Now we will run the procedure. So we're going to call our modify variables, and we're going to pass into it our num1 and num2. Then we're going to rewrite our values of the variables. If we're going to run this, you can see that num1 has remained same after running the procedure and even before running the procedure. But num2 has changed, as its initial value was 10 and its final value is now 100. Why? Because we had passed num2 as the parameter b, and you can see that the parameter b has been passed by reference. What it has done is that it's taken the actual reference to the memory of num2 from the computer memory, and it has passed to this procedure. So the procedure is actually modifying num2 from inside of the procedure, whereas a is remaining the same. You can even remove this by value flag over here, and still a will be passed by value.